Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to do a first impressions review on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. I forgot for a second what it was called. This palette has become super duper mega hyped, and that was why I didn't want to try it before. But the more eyeshadow palettes Anastasia Beverly Hills comes out with, more and more people compare it to the original Modern Renaissance and say that this is still the best one. So I wanted to buy it and I wanted to try it out and see for myself if I think that it is worth the hype. My voice sounds a little bit weird because I have been sick for about a week, but I really wanted to film this video, so excuse my voice. I hope you can bear with me throughout this. The Modern Renaissance palette retails for $42 in the US. It costs 545 crowns here in Sweden, and it has 14 shades in the palette. It also comes with a little brush that I haven't tried yet and a big mirror, which I really appreciate because I travel a lot and I bring makeup when I'm going to my friends and stuff in other cities, so I really appreciate having a mirror that I can actually do my makeup with, and that's what I did throughout this video too, just to try it out, and it worked perfectly. When it comes to the packaging of this palette, I think it's super beautiful. I love the color. I think it goes with the theme really well, and even though it is nice touching this soft touch palette, I think it is not practical at all. I know that this fabric will get really dirty really fast, so that's actually a drawback even though it looks good. So I will go through all the colors of the palette first, and then I will jump in and do this eye makeup look and tell you what I think throughout the process, and then my final thoughts at the end. So the first shade is called Tempera, and it is a cream shade that is a perfect matte brow bone highlight for my skin tone. And then we have the shade Golden Ochre that I think is underhyped. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this shade, but I think it's really versatile. It is darker and a little bit more yellow than Tempera, the first color, and I think it is great for like smoking out and smudging out and blending for my skin tone, but I think it is a really good highlighting shade for a darker skin tone. So I think it's a really versatile shade, and I like that they have that color in here. Next we have a shimmery shade, and it's called Vermeer, and it is just like a champagne pinky type of color that is really beautiful, and I think it's great as an inner corner highlight, and I think it works for a lot of skin tones. Next up we have Buon Fresco, that is a cool toned, medium toned shade, and it actually has a hint of like purple in it, or like lilac, and that is also matte, and it blends really beautifully and yeah, isn't dry or anything like that. Next we have Antique Bronze, that is also a super creamy and nice color, and it is not as bronze as you would hope for a shade that's called Antique Bronze. It is actually, I would say, like a purpley brown color with a little bit of a sheen, but nevertheless it is beautiful, and it swatches really nice and has a nice purpley shift in it. Then we have this super nice shade called Love Letter, and it is a cranberry reddish pinkish type of color. This actually stained my finger a lot. Like, it has been a few hours since I swatched all the colors, and my finger is still stained even though I have washed my hands and everything, so be aware of that. And this was actually the first shade that I thought was a little bit dry. So when I touched it and swatched it, I felt like it was a little bit dry and didn't go on as smoothly in the swatches as the other colors. But nevertheless, it is a beautiful color and you can still work with it. Lastly, on the top row, we have Cypress Umber, and it is the darker shade in the palette, and it is just a matte dark brown shade. So I really love that they have that color in here, and I also don't mind that it isn't a black in here, but I will talk more about that later in the video. Then we go to the second row, and first we have Raw Sienna, and it's just a super nice transition color that isn't super warm. And then we have Burnt Orange, that is really similar to the one before, but it is a little bit more orange and warm toned. So I will go in more about what I think about the colors later in the video. Now I'm just going through the shades and how they feel. Next up we have Primavera, that in the swatches is super beautiful and metallic, and it's just a gold shade that I was really excited by swatching the colors. Excuse my hand here, I tried to swatch one of the colors and now I'm like stained and it looks awful. Next up we have the color Red Ochre, and it is a deeper reddish purpley color, and this one actually is swatched a lot better than the previous reddish color that's called Love Letter. Next up we have one more reddish purpley color, and this one is called Vegetarian Red. I feel like when watching these two, the Vegetarian Red and the Love Letter are quite similar. The Vegetarian Red has a little bit of shimmer and the Love Letter is matte, but other than that they are quite similar just by swatching them. Next up we have Warm Taupe, and it is a mid-toned, like yellowy brown taupey color, and it is definitely more warm than the Buon Fresco shade. When you first look at them, you think maybe they are similar, but they are not, because the Buon Fresco is definitely cool toned and this one is definitely warm toned. So I like both of those shades, and both of them swatch really nicely. And then we have the last shade that's called Real Gar, and it is I would say the most orange shade, except the burnt orange, in this palette. And first when I swatched it, I was a little bit shocked because I actually thought it would be a lot lighter of an orange, but it is actually quite a deep orange. And nevertheless, it swatched beautifully. So that are all the shades and the swatches of this palette, and except Vegetarian Red and Love Letter here being a little bit worse to swatch, like they were a little bit drier and tugged a little bit more, and I had to go over them a couple of times to get the opacity of the other colors. Except from that, all the colors swatched beautifully, and by first glance they are super beautiful. Let's dig into this palette. I would just grab the shades that I would gravitate to if I would do a look on a normal evening. So I'm going to start with the shade Raw Sienna, and this shade has a little bit of kick up, but I don't mind it if it doesn't have a lot of fallout on my eyes. So I'm just going to apply this on the outer edge and into my crease. And I'm just applying this with the Lux Crease Brush 228 from Zoeva. I don't have any fallout on my face, and it blended out beautifully. It was a little bit darker than I thought though, so I'm going to go into Golden Ochre. I'm going to blend this out on the edges of the first shade, just to have a nicer gradient. That shade also blended out super beautifully and easily, and I think it's a perfect like blender shade for my skin tone. So now I'm picking up the shade Red Ochre with the Lux Petite Crease Brush from Zoeva, and I'm just going to apply that in the crease but not blend it up as much, and also in the outer corners. So Red Ochre is a beautiful shade. I really like it. I only had a little bit of fallout right here, but I don't feel like it's a big issue because it is a darker color, so I kind of expected it. So now I'm just going to deepen up the crease a little bit more in the outer corner, and I want to use as many of the shades as possible. So I'm going to go in with a Real Techniques shading brush, and I'm going to go into this darkest color in the palette that's called Cypress Umber, and I'm going to focus that on the outer corners to deepen it up. So I went a little darker than I meant to, so I'm going back into the Red Ochre shade just to get a little bit more of the red back into the makeup. And I also like the little bit of orange that is peeking through up here, so I'm going into the Burnt Orange shade with the blending brush I used before, and I'm just going to apply it at the edges so the orange peeks through a little bit more. And to blend it out a bit, I'm going in with the Sigma Tapered Blending E40 brush, just going back and forth on the edges. So now I'm going to dip into this beautiful gold shade called Primavera. I think that's how you say it. And normally I use these shades with only my finger. I apply them with my finger because I feel like they get more metallic that way, so I'm going to do that this time around too. So I'm just dipping in my ring finger into that shade, and I'm going to apply it on my eyelid. So that shade was actually less metallic than I thought it would be. I mean, it's still beautiful as you can see, but when swatching it, it looked super intense and super metallic, and It is quite metallic, but it is still beautiful, and I think it would be even more intense, this shade, if I used it with a setting spray. So now I'm going to focus on the lower lash line, and as I said, I want to use as many of the shadows as possible. So I'm going into this orangey, like burnt orange shade down here that's called Realger, I think, and I'm just picking it up with a Zoeva 226 smudger brush, and I'm going to smudge it on the lower lash line. And I'm also dipping the same brush into red ochre, the darker red that I used before, and I'm smudging that also on the lower lash line, but focusing it more on the outer corners. And I'm also going to take a little bit more of the red ochre shade on my Lux Petite crease brush from Zoeva that I used before, and I'm going to put it back in between the gold and the brown on the eyelid so that it gets a little bit more red again. Lastly, for the eyeshadow, I'm going into this Tempera shade up in the left corner, and I'm going to apply that as my brown... Why did I say brown bone highlight? And I'm just applying it with a Zoeva Luxe pencil brush, and I'm going to apply it to the highest points up here. And I'm just applying with the pencil brush the third shade from the left on the upper row. It's called BareMinerals or something, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And with the pencil brush, I'm just going to apply it on my inner corners. So now I'm going to finish off my eyes off camera with some cream kohl liner on the waterline and a lot of mascara, and I'm also going to brush off the fallout that I have on my cheeks, and I'll be right back. So this is the finished look, and I just threw on a dark red lipstick because I felt super folly. So the most important thing for me, except the shadow quality itself, is can I use the palette on its own? And I definitely feel like I can with this one. For my skin tone, it has a great highlighting shade for the brow bone that's matte, and it also has a shimmering highlighting shade for the inner corner. This golden ochre shade I feel is really versatile because I feel like it's a good like blending out shade for my skin tone, but probably a great highlighting shade for a dark skin tone. So I really appreciate that shade. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it. I also don't mind that this palette doesn't have a black in here because I rarely use black shadows anyways. I think this dark brown shadow here is really great and versatile, but please, if you have a darker skin tone, leave your thoughts on this palette down below because I feel like it will really help out a lot of people if we all share our experiences with each other. So even though I think it's a great palette and I can use it on its own without a doubt, I feel like it could have been even better with a few changes. So when I first saw the palette, I thought that these two shades looked really similar and that these two shades in the palette looked really similar, and they are. The burnt orange shade is definitely more warm toned than the raw sienna, but I feel like they are too similar to be in the same palette. So even though it is a little bit of a difference, I would much more appreciate if this palette had a mid-tone brown. I feel like a mid-tone brown would make it so much more versatile, because now when I look at the palette and when I have played with it, I feel like you can only do like an orange look or a red look or something in between. But if this palette had a mid-tone brown, you would have the cream shades, you would have transition shades, you would have the shimmering shadow on the lid, a dark brown, and you would have that mid-tone brown to just make it like just a perfect brown everyday eyeshadow look. And I feel like a lot of us actually gravitate toward those looks from a day-to-day basis. But I don't know if that was the purpose with this palette, but I feel like just that one mid-tone brown would make this palette so much more versatile. Also, these two shades, Love Letter and Vegetarian Red, are quite similar. One of them has a little bit of a sheen to it and the other one hasn't, and one is a little bit more red and the other one is a little bit more purple, but on the lid they are really similar. So I feel like just a true red in this palette instead of those two that are really similar would also have been perfect. But nevertheless, it is a beautiful palette and it is versatile as it is too, and as I said, I can definitely see myself using this without grabbing any other shadows, so that is great. But the things that I said about the shades are just my personal opinion on how this palette would be even better. Then when it comes to shadow quality, I feel like the hype is worth it. I feel like the shadows blend super beautifully. I feel like it is kind of foolproof. Like even when I thought it looked like I had a black eye for a while there during my look, it blended super easily and the shadows melt into each other beautifully. So you know, it it just ends up looking good anyways, even when you are a bit worried that it won't. So all in all, I think this palette is worth the hype, and I really did like it, and I see myself using it, but with some tweaks I feel like it would be even better. So if you have tried this palette or own this palette, please let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Do you think it's worth the hype? Do you use it a lot or not? And if you like this video, please don't forget to thumbs up, and I really hope to see you in my next one. So have an awesome day, night, or morning, or whenever you're watching this, and I hope to see you soon. Bye! Underneath my brown bone, highlight on the eye as a brown bone. I keep saying brown bone. I don't know how to says. This goes first impressions review on and show you great eyebrow highlight. Do appreciate oh my gosh. This review in this wood beautiful.